What's good? This is Detroit's Darkest Times. Today's story is Trumbull Avenue. These are things I've did on Trumbull coming up in Detroit City. Witness a lot of fights, a lot of drug dealing, shootings, and at the time, I wasn't thinking anything about it, actually. To me, it seemed like it was part of life. And that's what normally happened. But as years went on, I realized that wasn't a normal setting for people. And just the things that I've seen and I've heard and witnessed is all types of things across the board. And one thing I do want to talk about is Trumbull and Warren. And this is an area where me and my friends hung out sometimes. It's right close to the Wayne State University. Then you had a Shell gas station on the corner, a big church. And then on the other corner, you had an empty field with an apartment building right next to it. And this apartment building is where some of my friends lived. And their grandmother lived downstairs. And they lived upstairs with their mom. And their dad wasn't around. Matter of fact, I don't think I ever seen a dude around the whole time I knew them cats. I don't know. I don't know if their mom just, like, if she would date a guy or see a guy or something, maybe she just went to dude's place or something, because I never seen a guy or anything. And she was always, every time I seen her, she was by herself or with her kids or something like that. But in this apartment building, we hung out sometimes there. And my friends had a lot of albums at their house. And these are vinyl albums. And just at the time, it was just whatever was popular at that time is what they had, And basically, they was into rock. So, I'm talking Van Halen, Ozzy, Ted Nugent, stuff like that. And that's what they were into. And maybe today they're still into rock and roll. you know. But at this building, this is where I, found out that their uncle was smoking crack. Now, I thought that was crazy. And then one of my friends, he ended up hooking up with a lady that moved in the building. And she was like in her 30s, I would say, maybe early 30s. Maybe early 30s, maybe late 20s, maybe. I'm not for sure. But she was an older woman. Then he was like, I want to say he was like maybe 13 years old. So he had actually moved in with her, and she lived in an apartment across from his mom's apartment. He actually moved in with her. And one time I was over there, and I was knocking on the door, gonna holler at one of them, and he opens the side door, and he's telling me that's his place, and come and check it out and all that. So when I went over there inside the apartment, the lady was on the couch, and he was like, "This." I said, "Who is this?" He said, "This is my girlfriend." And I was like, "Really?" And he was like, "Yeah." So this was a full-grown woman going with a 13-year-old boy. He might have been 12. And I thought that was crazy. But he was happy, And I was laughing about it because I just thought it was, age different is one thing, but that was just a real distant age difference. And, back in them days, if a young dude had a woman that was older or a grown woman or something like that, nobody was saying anything about it really, and nobody was hating on it or anything like that. Versus if it was a dude and then a young girl, then yeah, everybody would have a problem with that. But it was just, something that nobody really pressed on, things like that. But anyway, this cat that I'm talking about, he had got to know this dude, and I think he got to know this dude. I'm not for sure, but I'm thinking it was through a paper route, like, deliver newspapers and stuff like that. I'm thinking that's how he got to know the dude, because when he started running around with that dude, and I hung around with, all of them, but mostly the middle one, and because it was three brothers. And I hung around with them and stuff like that, but we never knew that dude until later on down the road. I don't even think we ever met him. I just seen him. But anyways, this dude that was going with this older woman, he actually started running around with this older dude, and this dude, he had a son, and his son was a little bit older than him. But then he, started, staying over their house and all this stuff. And then later, his brother was telling me that dude started, buying him, all different kinds of stuff and giving him money and all this. And we thought it was kind of weird that that's what was going on, especially way back then. But his brother had told me that, he thought something weird was going on with that dude because he's an older dude and stuff like that. we never really got it way deep down into it because we really, he mentioned a couple things to me about it, but I just really wasn't interested in, nothing like that. Like, if he was doing something crazy, I didn't even want to hear it or have no part of it. You know what I mean? So, but his brother was thinking that that dude was just trying to finesse his brother. Would be giving him money and buying him things and stuff like that. And who knows? He might have finessed him eventually, but you never know. But that was just a weird incident that one of my friends had went through and stuff like that. And then later, after he was telling me about the dude, then later they moved to another house off of it was like off of Trumbull down Temple, and it was on a back street over there. I don't remember the name of the street. But anyways, I went over there one day looking him up, and then his brother told me that he started smoking crack, and that he ended up stealing his other brother's stereo. And I think he said he sold it for crack or was going to trade it to the crack man for crack or something like that. He was saying something like that. And that tripped me out because I didn't know he was actually smoking crack, but, that's what his little brother told me. And I thought, dang, man, that's crazy. But, and back then, I ain't never seen his little brother do it, but I know they was, smoking weed and stuff like that at a very young age. And when he told me that his brother was smoking crack, and then said his other brother was looking for him, stuff like that. And so I don't know if they ever caught up with each other or, the other one just fled for good. I really don't know the situation. Because that was basically the last encounter that I had is when I had went over there to see him, and his little brother told me that story. And I was like, man, that is crazy. Because a lot of people fell victim to crack in our neighborhood, and in many neighborhoods for that matter. But a lot of people just fell victim to it. But I think what a lot of it's got to do with, them smoking weed at an early age and then trying something different, not knowing the effect that it's going to have on them, once they do it, But I felt for them guys because they were my friends as we was growing up. And I just thought it was crazy that his brother had told me that. And but after that I started running around with another dude on Huron Street. And me and him had attended his sister's 16th birthday party they had in the backyard. And had some drinks. We're young at this time, but we had some drinks. I want to say my first encounter with alcohol was, I want to say it was, at a very early age. And and a lot of people that was coming up back then, they had an encounter with alcohol at an early age. No matter if it was like at a party or just hanging out with friends or what the case may be. But I know my first encounter with alcohol was at a very early age. You know, and then it was just here and there. As the years passed, it was just here and there. But the friend that I started running around with on Huron Street, me and him was pretty tight, and he used to come over to my house and stuff like that, hang out. I remember one time we was hanging out and we went over to his house, and it was on the weekend. And he asked his mom and dad could he stay the night over at my house. I think it was like Saturday night or something on Elm Street. And it was Saturday night, and they was like, yeah, he can and stuff like that. So we went back to my house, and I asked my mother, would it be all right? And she said yes. So he was going to stay, and then it got real late, and then my stepdad was intoxicated, and he was like, that boy needs to go home. And I said, no, he's staying tonight. He said, no, he ain't. He's not. He can't stay tonight. And he was just being an ass, basically. But anyways, he had told him he had to go, and I was mad because it was dark out and stuff like that. So he basically just made him go home. He had to walk home real late. I think it was like 10 or 11 o'clock at night or whatever. And then his parents got mad because he told me later on he couldn't come back over because my stepdad had made him walk home in the dark, and his mom and them didn't appreciate that. And I was like, man, don't worry about that. I said, dude was just drunk, just being an ass. He said, well, yeah, but we're going to have to let this blow over because my parents was mad because he had made me walk home in the late night. And anyways, this cat, it was my stepdad. He was like, he would just sometimes get drunk and do some crazy stuff. I remember one time he got mad at my brother and his friends. And then he went and got a shotgun out of a room. He had like a room. It was like a long closet room. Then had a padlock on the door, and that's where he kept all his stuff at. And he had like a 12 gauge shotgun in there. And he had went to get the shotgun, and so he told him, he said, I'm going to get my shotgun. So they went out the house and on the side of the house, and then they went to the back fence and jumped over the fence into the alley. And don't you know, this cat actually aimed the gun back there and shot it. So it didn't hit nobody, but if it would have hit somebody, he would have been through, you know. And I don't recall what the incident was over, if they just got into an argument or whatever. I don't recall what the incident was over, but I do remember him shooting a shotgun, you know, and they all had jumped. I think it was three of them. It was two of my brother's friends and then him, and they had jumped over the fence. And then my brother had stayed gone to the next day, just letting that guy, you know, sober up, stuff like that. Because basically he was kind of, you know, just wilding out, you know, and so he just did some crazy things at times, you know, and then but that dude was something else. And then finally my brother, he had got him an apartment over behind Carl's Chop House. I want to say it was like over more toward 3rd Street, I believe it was, but it's kind of like behind Carl's Chop House over in that area on one of them side streets. And well, I want to say 3rd Street, but it might have been Cass Avenue. I'm not for sure. But I had went over there one time with him and checked it out. And he's a young cat at this time. He's like, I want to say he's like maybe 16, maybe. He might have been 15 or 16 or whatever. And he got his own apartment and stuff, and then he had furniture in it and stuff like that. And I thought it was pretty cool that he had his own place, you know. And but it was pretty neat. And I think I stayed with him one night over there. And but it was just it was like in a big, what it was like in a big house. It's like one of these old ass houses, like, you know, from back in like the 20s or something like that. It had like a big house, but it had different apartments in it, you know, and that's how it was made from a long time ago. And it kind of reminded me of my friend Nick, and he had a place on Trumbull in Alexander, and it's right next to the church on Trumbull, and it was like a castle. The house was made like a castle, you know. And then it had secret ways where you could like go in a bedroom and open the wall. It was like a door, like a secret door. You open the wall and there was a walkway. You could walk behind the walls over to the next bedroom and stuff like that. And I thought that was crazy because this house used to belong to the church years back. And then his mom had bought it, you know. So I don't know if, you know, nuns lived there and the preacher lived there or what the deal was, but I just thought it was weird that they built that place where you had walkways to go to different rooms, you know what I mean, behind the walls. And you wouldn't know it if somebody didn't show it to you, you know, because that's my friend Nick. He was showing me the way that was, and I thought that was crazy. Even way back then, I was like, dang, I wonder what they were doing, you know. And you can only imagine, you know, whether, you know, there's just no telling what was going on in that place years back, you know. His mom was an artist, and his dad worked for the cable company, and then they had his mom and his dad had got separated, was getting a divorce, and his mom hooked up with this other cat. I don't know where she found him, maybe where she works at or something like that. I don't know, but he was like a younger type guy. And but I remember before dude moved into the house, the new guy, I went over there to visit my friend Nick, and his dad had pulled up in a van, in a blue van, and he was actually coming to get him. And so he asked his dad, "Can I go with him?" And he said, "Well, I'm not bringing you back until tomorrow." And then he was like, asking me, "Can I go?" And I was like, "Well, if y'all want to stop by my house where I can ask if permission to go." So that's what we did. And his dad ended up living on the east side, and he had a rented apartment on the east side. But I do believe he was telling me his dad worked for the cable company at that time. And then he ended up, having to, deal with the stepdad and stuff like that. And at first he didn't like it. I don't know if they ended up, you know, getting close as years passed or whatever, or if he just never did like the dude. I don't know. But I do know he didn't like him at the beginning. Because we'd be hanging out on Trumbull and Canfield, just a whole group of us and stuff like that. And then this is when his stepdad first got into the picture and stuff. His stepdad would pull up there real fast, slam on the brakes, jump out the car, and tell Nick he had to go home and stuff like that. And then he would drive away. So he'd basically just make him walk home, without just letting him get in the car. And I thought that was crazy, but he didn't like it because dude was just basically being mean and embarrassing him in front of his friends. But I don't know, as time went, I don't know if they ended up, getting close or something like that. I think I heard one story about them two together from another friend of mine, but I ain't gonna get into that. So, but and then who's the, I don't know to this day. I really don't know if he still lives in that house or if he moved away or something like that. I don't know, but I used to dig that house because it was really nice. It had like it had a room on the side of it. It was like a flower, like a glass, roof and a glass sides and stuff like that where they kept plants and all that. And it was a pretty nice place. Then it had a staircase that went from the kitchen up to the upstairs. And then it had a staircase by the front door that went upstairs. And it was just that place was a real old place too, but it was made of brick. So a lot of times in brick places, and it actually looked like a little castle too, the way the roof was made and all that. So, but them, back in the days, they built some real nice, them antique houses. What we'll call today is antique house, but they just made them real good back in the days, like, and they last forever. But that was just a few incidents that we had with the new guy and stuff like that, and he's just basically just trying to be real strict, and I think he kind of approached it wrong. If he's going to be new in the family and all that, he was just going about it the wrong way, is what I felt like. And like I said, my friend Nick, he didn't like him at the beginning, so I don't know if they ended up, getting along later on down the road or whatever. But and then my other friend Charlie, me and him hung out, and he just wanted to hook me up with his cousin, and that was a redheaded chick, and she was about 16. When I first started going with her, she was about, well, I think she was about, I want to say 15 maybe. And when I first started going with her, and then I was like way under that, I think I was like maybe 10 and she was 15 when we first started dating. First started going together. And she was an all right girl. She was built like a full-grown lady. And I was cheesing all the time with that because it was just pretty smooth. But I've always been pretty lucky with the women and stuff like that. I mean, I ain't never had, no issues with ladies or anything like that. But anyways, Charlie, one time he comes to my house and he's got a paper sack, and it's kind of late in the evening on the weekend, and he comes by and he's got a paper sack and he's got some prescription cough medicine in this paper bag. Now, I don't know if it was his cough medicine or whose it was, but he was basically drinking this stuff,